Greetings, fellow members of our English department and other educators whom this video may concern, which, as you will inevitably find throughout this presentation, is every educator concerned about serving students well in the age of generative AI. I would like to use this presentation to address the issue of ethical AI use on contemporary education. Of the myriad problems and difficulties facing secondary education, none is perhaps so salient and pressing as the growing concern among educators regarding how to judiciously and ethically respond to students' use of artificial intelligence, or AI, for academic purposes. Our employer, a high school in Illinois which will hereafter be referred to as South High as part of District X, began the 2025-26 school year with professional development, wherein staff were informed that students should and would have access to district-approved AI tools in our classes. Their justification was that depriving them of exposure to AI tools puts them at a considerable disadvantage when the contemporary workforce utilizes AI tools on a daily basis, and workplace readiness is one of our collective goals as a school. Although District X is pushing staff at South High to implement AI into course instruction, echoing the sentiment of students surveyed in Smolanski et al. 2023, who believe that utilizing AI in education is necessary due to its prevalence in the workforce, the literature on the psychological impact of AI on K-12 students cautions against headlong integration. Kundu and Bedge 2025 conducted a systematic scoping review to assess AI utilization across K-12 students, and the resultant cognitive, emotional, and behavioral responses among participants across 24 relevant studies. Their findings suggest that a nuanced approach is necessary to AI integration in primary and secondary schools, as both negative and positive consequences spring therefrom. For high school students specifically, Kundu and Bedge found that AI integration offered individualized analytics for learning pathways, college readiness, and career guidance, but at the same time exposed secondary students to excessive screen time, data privacy risks, and cognitive overload, all of which contribute to isolation, anxiety, and ethical concerns. The researchers suggest balancing intentional, deliberate AI implementation with human engagement, while remaining conscious of the psychological harm of excessive reliance or exposure. Williamson et al. 2024 offer additional warnings against the headlong integration of AI systems into primary and secondary education, mirroring the data privacy concerns regarding student data exploitation that Kundu and Bedge found troubling. Williamson et al. 2024 suggest that the largest tech companies such as Microsoft, Meta, and Google have ignored large-scale calls for further AI regulation and development in favor of short-sighted, full-scale integration, largely motivated by monetary gain. In schools, headlong AI integration is conducive to data exploitation, the degradation of teacher-student relationships, mechanistic instruction, and corrupted curriculum through bias and misinformation. While Williamson et al. Suggest a complete pause on schools integrating AI applications until these systems are properly vetted, developed, and legislated, in lieu of total abstinence, they also offer modern educators the practical solution of using AI deliberately, only when its integration can be logically and evidentially proven to the public to be of more use than pedagogy which does not rely on digital technology. So how can we be more deliberate in our integration of AI applications and do more good than harm? First, we can apply the golden rule of emerging technologies. Emerging technologies being those which do not have enough research and data from which to derive grounded pedagogy. This golden rule is known as the least dangerous assumption, which specifies that in the absence of conclusive data, educational decisions ought to be based on assumptions which, if incorrect, will have the least dangerous effect on the likelihood that students will be able to function independently as adults. The implications for educators using the least dangerous assumption is that we must explore the AI we plan to use for instruction and ensure, to the best of our ability, that using AI in a specific context is the best means to achieve a learning target, and that there is no foreseeable harm in doing so. Another way to ensure the ethical use of generative AI for the purposes of enhancing education is to remember that the output of AI applications is not 100% reliable, and that as educators, we are still ultimately responsible for the veracity of learning content. This axiom can be applied to any output of generative AI which students create as well. We should inform them of the fallibility of generated content, and teach them that fact-checking and cross-referencing is as valuable and necessary as it was before the advent of AI and large language models. As Huari and Smith-Ferguson 2025 explain, OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT themselves, cautioned educators against trusting AI-generated content implicitly and advised them to use their expertise to correct any output containing erroneous or biased information, especially in the context of education. In fact, OpenAI was partially motivated to create NSW EduChat to provide more accurate generative AI responses and safeguard student privacy. While this application may prove useful in an educational context, the takeaway here is that not all generative AI applications and chatbots are created equal, and educators should be mindful in choosing those they integrate into their curriculum. Trust et al., as cited in Huari and Smith-Ferguson, further explain that the evaluation of AI output is in itself a valuable learning opportunity for students, as there is an opportunity for educators and students to critically investigate the production, design, output, and influence of this technology, which can help build critical media skills. Just as we teach students to critically evaluate traditional physical and digital sources, we should likewise teach them to evaluate generative AI content for bias and misinformation. Just as knowing students' learning needs, individual learning styles, and preferences are important in traditional education, tailoring instruction that utilizes AI to the target population is as crucial now as it ever was. One demographic that stands to gain uniquely in this regard is the body of students with autism and neurodiversities. McDonald et al., 2025, conducted a scoping literature review and found that students with autism and other neurodiversities face disproportionate levels of unemployment and underemployment, and that emerging AI technologies have a substantial impact on improving social communication and workplace readiness skills for this target population. The ways generative AI can be used to bolster communication and workplace readiness include, but are not limited to, consistency and specificity of the task at hand, visually cued directions, decreased distractibility related to extraneous stimuli, elimination of social demands, and the immediacy and predictability of responses. More broadly, educators need to be able to use generative AI to a lesser or greater extent in their curriculum based on the real and perceived benefit to the target population. It is not adequate to apply a one-size-fits-all approach to generative AI's integration into the curriculum. Rather, AI integration must be intentional and well-designed, with the learning needs of the target population in mind throughout the instructional design process. AI has the potential to be the defining technology of our generation, yet it is still an emerging technology, and as such there is not sufficient research and data to guide ethical best practice pedagogy with any comfortable level of certainty, let alone absolute certainty. As a consequence, bereft of research-driven pedagogical guidelines, educators themselves have the unique opportunity to act as researchers and inform best practices in the age of ever-evolving technological advancement. As a final proposition, I recommend that educators participate in the action research process to put the benefits of ethical AI integration to the test in their own classrooms. According to Dewsbury and Twyman, 2020, action research allows practitioners to examine behavior systematically through logical and critical analysis, which is conducive to change and action, all through valid and dynamic scientific inquiry at the local level. Therefore, the issue of ethical AI integration in the secondary English classroom can be investigated in practice in real time. In your own professional learning community, conduct action research to determine the validity of using generative AI to achieve specific learning targets, and analyze the data to evaluate whether the benefits outweigh the risks, and whether AI integration leads to enhanced learning over more traditional means. Maintain uniformity across all courses, and implement the plan with consistency, from design to implementation and data collection through analysis and evaluation. Where the contemporary research falls short of guiding educators in best practice for AI integration, we must not be afraid to conduct the research ourselves and collaboratively determine the course of action which best serves students and leads to optimized learning, as is our ethical responsibility. Though the research is still forthcoming, and educators do not have a perfectly clear path forward to ethical AI integration in curriculum and instructional design, we are not left without certain guideposts that the contemporary literature provides. We can integrate generative AI into instruction deliberately when doing so can be evidentially proven to enhance learning outcomes. Educators can keep the least dangerous assumption in view, making pedagogical decisions which, if incorrect, will have the least dangerous effect on the likelihood that students will be able to function independently as adults. We can analyze the credibility of generative AI output, since the evaluation thereof is in itself a valuable learning opportunity for students, as there is an opportunity for educators and students to critically investigate the production, design, output, and influence of this technology, which can help build critical media skills. As researchers ourselves, we can conduct action research to examine the effects of AI integration systematically through logical and critical analysis, which is conducive to change in action, all through valid and dynamic scientific inquiry at the local level. Finally, we can fall back on our professional discretion, remembering our training, our education, our professional development, and our experience to lead students forward by the most ethical means conceivable. Though in our department we were enjoined to integrate generative AI headlong without any clear direction or guidelines, it is our responsibility as educators to use generative AI in such a way that optimizes learning outcomes and mitigates risk to students. By heeding the research outlined in this presentation and designing instruction which never deviates from ethical considerations, I believe we can do just that. These are my references. Thank you for your time and attention. May your students be well served by it.